Is pixels still your go-to CSS unit in 2025? Come on, welcome to Web Dev in 10, and in today's video, I'm going to be helping you get a better understanding of CSS units. CSS unit is one of those important concepts in CSS that is not well talked about. I'm here today to share my knowledge on CSS units and how it can help you build a more user-friendly website. So what are CSS units? CSS units, by definition, are used to define measurements in CSS properties like font size, margin, padding, width, height, and so on. They are basically a way to measure components or things in your website. There are two major categories of CSS units. We have relative units and absolute units. Just like the name says, relative units are CSS units whose value depends on the unit of the components they are contained on the Windows viewport, which basically means that they depend on whatever they are in. They don't have a fixed measurement. And I like to categorize the relative unit, which I categorize them as units relative to parent elements and also those relative to the Windows viewport. Parent elements are when you have a somewhat like a container, let's say a div inside a section. The units of those div, if you use a relative unit, it will depend on the section, since the section is the container. We'll see this better when we get into the coding aspect. Units that are relative to the parent elements are the percent, em, and rem. Percent is very self-explanatory. Basically, it takes a percentage of the parent element, so it is relative to the parent element. And then we have em, which is relative to the font size of the parent element, and then rem, which is relative to the root element font size, which is mostly the HTML. So the units that are relative to the viewport are vw, vh, vmin, vmax, and a lot more. I won't be talking about the rest because they don't support all browsers at the moment, and you might not really see them on your day-to-day coding journey. But if you feel like you want to know more about them, you can definitely let me know in the comment section. I can create a video explaining them. So for VW, that stands for viewport width. If you say 5 VW, it means 5% of the viewport width. If you say VH, that's viewport height. So you take a percentage of the viewport's height. And then we have vmin and vmax. I feel like I need to better explain this vmin and vmax because they're a little different from VW and VH. So understanding vmin stands for viewport minimum. It represents 1% of the smaller dimension of the viewport, either width or height. So if you check out your screen, most of the time we have this width of the screen wider than the height. So if you should use 5 vmin, it means 5% of the viewport minimum, which means the viewport that is currently smaller. So let me give an example where you can actually see it. Let's take this white box as the screen where your website is displayed. And then you give this container, this golden, or is it yellow, I don't know, container a width of 100 vmin, also an height of 100 vmin, which means 100% of the v minimum. At the moment, you can see that the x stands for the width and y stands for the height. If you should check between the x and the y, we can see that the y is smaller. So like that's the minimum viewport. So you take 100% of that minimum viewport and use it for the size of the container. Let's check another example. In this case, the x is smaller than the y. So when we gave it a width of 100 vmin and an height of 100 vmin, we took the measurement of the x, which is the width, because that's the minimum width, and used it for both the width and the height. And then for vmax, just the opposite, this viewport maximum, and it represents 1% of the larger dimension of the viewport, which in this case, we can see another example. In this case, the x is obviously bigger than the y, and if you say at the height of 100 vmax, so we'll take the entire length of the x, which we used for the height, so it's a little bit out. If you have the website, you have to be able to scroll down and everything like that. So that's an example for our relative units. And then we have absolute units. Absolute units are CSS units whose value does not depend on the unit or the components they are contained. So they have a fixed value. If it's 2 centimeters, it's 2 centimeters, it doesn't change. If it's 100 meters, it's 100 meters, it doesn't change. Even if the parent element is 5 meters, it's still at 100 meters, no difference. These are the units most people use, and it kills the responsiveness of the website. The first one is pixels. This is the most common one. Everywhere pixels, pixels, pixels. You use it for fonts, you use it for width, height. and then you're saying your website is not responsive. How is it going to be responsive? If you gave it a fixed value, it won't change. So we have pixels, we have centimeter, we have millimeter, we have inch, we have point, and we have picker. Most of these are not really as used as pixels, but they also exist. 1 inch equals to 72 points, 1 inch equals to 6 picker. So we have that. And then what's the advantages of using relative units? It has a lot of advantages. Please stop fixing too much on absolute units. We have adapt to different screen size. If you give a screen size depending on the width of the screen, so like that's going to make sense. You don't have to be changing the size of the container for every change in screen. And then we have ensure responsive design. Responsiveness, that's the first thing you have to know or think about when it comes to designing. Responsiveness is the first thing and the most important. You don't want your website looking good on a PC but looking terrible on a mobile phone. And then we have better accessibility. So like the common beginner mistakes, something I've seen a lot, is overusing pixels. They don't work with responsiveness. Pixels, responsiveness, they don't work well together. So don't overuse pixels. Use them only when necessary. We have combining EM and REM incorrectly. Fine, they work fine. EM is nice. They work interchangeably, but they are different. They are not the same. They don't work the same way. So don't use them too much. You want to use EM, stick with EM. You want to use REM, stick with, but don't put them inside. Don't put 1/4 EM, another one REM. Choose one. And then mixing units. Don't use too much units for just one property. Just one property. You're using a margin 10 pixels, 5 inches. That does not make sense. Don't do that. Just stick to one. 10 inches, 10 pixels, 20 pixels, something like that. And I think that's all. So like time to code. It's ready for us. Like check this out on our index.html file and see how it actually works so we can like understand it better. The first I'm going to be showing you is the relative units, the VW, VH, Vmin and Vmax, how they work. To do that, I'm going to be creating a few containers in the body, just random divs. I'm going to name these VW, VH because like they go hand in hand. I want to like easily explain it to you together, how they work together. So just name this VW and VH. And then we have another div for Vmin. And then Vmax. And lastly, percent. Oh, I forgot to write Vmax here. The reason I'm starting with these four is because they are mostly used with containers. I want to show you how units work well with containers. The others are mostly used with font sizes, except from pixels. You can use pixels for both containers and font sizes. So let's add a style here. I don't want to create another file for the style. And then the first thing I'm going to be doing is removing the default margin that is on the body, so we can easily see what's going on. Let's start with VW and VH. We should give this container a background color of red and a width of 100 VW, which means 100% of the viewport width. As you can see, it goes all the way. And for those of us that don't know what viewport is from here, this corner where we can see the design, from here all the way to this place. So like that's that rectangle, that's our viewport. Now let me change it to like 80 viewports, which is 80% of the viewport. Can you see like there's a change? If I should make this responsive, that's like even with the way I'm changing the width, it keeps changing and it still stays at 80%, which means it's depending on the viewport width. It's not depending, it's not a fixed unit. It's not like pixels. If I should give this 100 pixels, no matter how small it is, it's not going to change, it's not going to shrink. Let me show you. I should call this 1800 pixels. This is 1800 pixels, right? And let's bring this down. Can you see? It's not changing, it's not shrinking. That's why between relative units and absolute units. Now let's say we have the height as well to 100 VH. Is 100 of the view. Can you see it has pushed everything away and it's consuming the entire screen? So that's VW and VH. Now that we know what VW and VH is, let's reduce it. Let's leave the width as 100. Now for Vmin, Let's give that a background color of green. And if I should give a width of 100 vmin, what do you think is going to happen based on what I said before? Which dimension is currently smaller? Which viewport is currently minimum? If you understood what I said previously, you obviously know that the height is currently smaller than the width. So the div would go across the entire width. Now let's save this. The width here is currently the full length of the height. So like the height is currently smaller. So that's why that's currently the minimum viewport. So it's taking 100% of the minimum viewport, which at the moment is the height. If I should reduce the width, can you see it's going all the way across now? Because at the moment, the minimum is the width. So it's taking up the entire width because that's the current minimum width. But I should give it an height of 100 vmin. It's not going to go all the way across because the width is currently the minimum viewport, and Vmax obviously does the opposite. Let's give that a background of blue, and I should give it a width of 100 Vmax. And can you see it's going out? Why? Because like it's taking the dimension of the height, and the height is longer because that's the maximum, so it's longer than the current width, so it's taking 100% of the height. But the width was longer than the height, it's going to go all the way, it's not overflowing. So now that the maximum is the width, it's taking the entire length of the width. Can you see it's not like overflowing, which means the current maximum viewport is the width, and it's taking that into consideration. That's how vmin and vmax works. Now for percentage is a little different. If I should give this a width of 100%, let's see what's going to happen. Can you see it goes all the way across? Why? Because the current container it is in, the parent element is the body, and the body is the entire viewport. If I should put this in a container, let's put the percent in a container, and I should give that container a width of 80 VW. Can you see it changes? Now it is the current 100% is 80 VW because the container it is inside has a width of 80 VW. So it takes 100% of whatever container it is in. It could be 80%, 20%, however you want it. But if you say 100%, it is taking 100% of the width or height of the container it is currently in, which doesn't work for the rest. If I should put VW inside a container as well, let me give it the same name, which is 80 VW, that doesn't affect it. You see it is currently width of 100 VW for VW and VH, and the container is what, 80 VW. Now let's move to fonts. Let's create a paragraph that says, now that's the only paragraph there, so I can just directly select it. If I should give it a font size of 20 pixels, so that's the current font size, 20 pixels. Nothing is wrong, nothing is going on. Let's say I am someone that doesn't like small text. I decided to change my Chrome settings to give me a much larger text. What do you think is going to happen with a website that is based on pixels only, that uses fonts based on pixels? Now let me show you. Let me go to settings, and then if I change the font size to very large, it is currently at very large. Now let's see. Do you think there's a change? Let me try it again. Medium. Doesn't look like it's changing, but you can see like Vmax and percent here, the sizes are changing. That's because they're relative to the Windows viewport. Now let's try to create another paragraph. Now we gave this a font size of 1 rem. I think this is a little bigger. Let me change the pixels to 16 pixels. Can you see like they are somewhat the same size? So if I should change this from medium to very large, you can see the rem changes, but the pixel did not. So like that's the difference between using a pixel and rem or em. If I should use em, it's almost the same thing. I'm still going to show you the difference between rem and em. Comparing rem to pixels, rem and em to pixels, they are mostly the same. If I change this to em, can you see it also changes? Let me show you the difference between rem and em. Now let me put this rem inside the container. and em as well inside the container. So they are currently both in the same container. Let me remove this. If I should put the font container, let's say I give it a font size of 16 pixels. That's an absolute unit, so it's not changing. That's the size I want the container in. Now let's give rem a font size of 1 rem and also em a font size of 1 em. Hence they're both 1 rem, 1 em. Now let's see if there's going to be a difference. Rem is much larger than em. Em is looking exactly the same as the 16 pixel zone, which is a font size. That's because em depends on the size of its parent element, which is this container at the moment. Because I have said the parent container is 16 pixels, it's not going to go past it. 1 em is going to be equal to 16 pixels. If I said 20 pixels, it's going to be 1 em is going to be equal to 20 pixels. So it depends on the container it is in. But for rem, it depends on the root element. And what do you think is the root element based on your HTML structure? That's of course the HTML here. That's our root element, which is the container of everything. So I should change the font size for the root container. Let's see what happens to rem as well. So I should give HTML a font size of 16 pixels as well. Now we see rem2 has reduced in size. So like that's the difference between absolute unit and relative unit. So now when you want to create your upcoming projects, you know what to use and when to use absolute unit, when to use relative unit. I hope your next projects will be more responsive and much more user friendly. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so I can upload more videos relating to this. See you guys later. Bye.